This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are live here in the studio, as we are most Sundays, when I am not on the road traveling, that is. So we are also on Facebook Live. So if you're over watching on Facebook, feel free to ask your questions. I'll try to answer them during the commercial break. And the really good questions, I'll actually weave directly into the show. So this week, it's going to be me primarily talking about a topic that is a real deep personal importance to me. And then we'll have a special guest that will pop in for the final section, the final segment, to be part of a special announcement that we're making here today on Killer Innovations. So first off, before we get into the topic, I want to thank all of you, the emails that have been coming in, the postings and the sharing and the engagements over on the social media side, whether it be Twitter or Facebook or especially LinkedIn. We are pretty active over there. A lot of people are sharing the content in that we post pretty much every day. We'll put up 2 or 3 posts a day across all 3 of those social media. So follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, or over on LinkedIn. So you can just go over to killerinnovations.com, and all of the social media links are at the top of the page for the show. So today's topic is around what I call winning in the innovation economy. Now, if you go back through all of the different economic shifts that we've had, we had the industrial economy, which was the explosion of specialized manufacturing and scale. And so, in the UK, that resulted in things like factories to make clothes and factories to make parts. In the US, we saw it with factories and the invention of the assembly line with Ford and the creation of the Model T. And we've been coming out of this industrial economy, into the, what I would call the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, 90s even, on knowledge and information economy. So that is the shift from manufacturing being the real source of economic growth to the role that information and data plays and knowledge plays. But what we're seeing now is that we are shifting from that information and knowledge economy over to the creative economy. And one of the things I want to talk about is a whole different range of things that impact or lay the groundwork to convince you that this innovation economy is big, it's growing, it's accelerating, and it's here today. So the first thing I want to take a look at is what I call the impact from investing in innovation. So we've all been out there and we've all looked at R&D spends, and look, my background as a chief technology officer for a Fortune 25 company in managing the innovation spend and looking at the impact of that innovation spend is one that actually is a good kind of starting point specifically for the innovation economy. And so what I want to take a look at is really this study here that shows really what I call the value from innovation. So in this case, this was a study. It's a little old. It's 2004, but it is one of the studies that I reference a lot. It's been proven out. It was very deep, with one caveat. This study had a heavy technology bent to it, so it's typically high tech, but other studies that have looked at other industries kind of fall into the same category. So in this case, 86% of all R&D spend is in what we call incremental innovations. They're, changing a feature set or slightly enhancing an existing product. And 14% on average is put into creating new offerings, new markets, and new industries. What's interesting, though, is what that impact on revenue is. So look at 14% into the new areas generates 38% of the revenue. Get that, 14% R&D spend generates 38% of the revenue. However, what is more shocking, though, is that 14% of R&D generates 61% of the margin. That's right, 61% of the margin. That's what we call the margin premium. That is, if you are doing really good innovation work, your customers will reward you with that margin premium, and it's that margin premium that drives economic growth for companies, for economic growth in industries, and ultimately economic growth on a GDP level. And so what we're going to talk about for the rest of this show is really about that 61%, that margin premium that you can get compensated in an innovation economy if you know how to compete and if you know how to win. So let's take a look at one of the byproducts of this now. Many businesses seen this. That study was from 2004 in Harvard Business Review. And now what we're seeing, though, is that companies are keenly interested in being able to get that margin premium. But a lot of companies have found themselves in the unenviable position of not investing themselves in those activities, and now have gone off and need to do innovation by acquisition. Now, I've written about this, I think, a couple weeks ago over on the blog. You can head on over to philmckinney.com, where I talked about innovation by acquisition. We've also talked about it here on the show over on Killer Innovations. And this is important. What we're seeing is this acceleration of companies who are looking to do this, quote, innovation by acquisition. Now, how prevalent of this is there? Just to quote you one statistic, 57% of all M&A deals in the last 3 years have been focusing on acquiring innovation. Now, you could jump to the conclusion that says, okay, anybody who's acquiring innovation this way did not have well-defined innovation processes, didn't have a funnel, whatever it is, right? And you could probably argue that in some cases. In some cases, some larger companies have used this as really a strategic decision. Rather than trying to invent on their own, they will acquire innovations by acquisition because they want that margin premium in order to use that margin to drive other parts of their business and to grow. Also, look, there's not enough dollars in the world. There's not enough dollars in anybody's budget to fully fund all of what you would want to do in the innovation space. It just isn't there, right? Look, at HP, total HP spend in 2011 on R&D was about $4 billion, 47,000 engineers, and 300 PhD researchers in labs. That's a lot of resources. Even with that kind of size, feeding a revenue for a business of 120 billion US dollars, that's not enough money even in order to make sure that you've got enough bets in all of the possible industry areas. So innovation by acquisition is not always a negative thing because there's new technologies, new areas, new innovations that pop up that you want to play in, that you want to get involved in, that you need to be a player in. And so in those cases, acquisition becomes a viable strategy. But what does this really mean? What is this 57% of all M&A deals in the last 36 months? What does that really play into this thing called the innovation economy? You bet. Because if I'm acquiring for innovation, I'm assuming that who I'm acquiring is doing really good, top-notch innovation, and therefore they've got an innovation premium. The innovation premium is really that metric, that golden egg that innovation generates that feeds and drives economic growth. If you look at just the innovations driving economic growth in companies like Apple or Facebook or Google, business, in the case of Google and Facebook, that didn't exist in the last 15 years, all just emerging in the last 15 years and actually swamping the total market cap of all of those technologies and innovation areas of our largest companies, such as the issues around General Motors and other large companies, large manufacturing companies that have come out of kind of that manufacturing economy and that knowledge economy. You've got companies like Google and Facebook that have a larger market cap than any of those. So yes, this whole drive of investing smartly with the right level of innovation and generating that margin premium is what is the key driver for this innovation economy. And we are just seeing it exploding. It will become the new thing. So stay right there. When we come back, we're going to pick up this conversation. We're going to take a look across the entire economics of innovation and how do you win at it. And again, we've got this special announcement in the fourth segment, so you're not going to want to go anywhere. We're going to be right back after this quick commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Thanks for joining us here on Killer Innovations. We are continuing our discussion to talk specifically about the whole driver and issues around the innovation economy, which is something that I am personally very passionate about, and one that I think we all need to really be aware of, because it impacts not only the organizations that we work for, but it's also going to determine and dictate what kind of jobs we are all going to have in the future. And so it's going to be increasingly important to make sure that we all understand what that role of that innovation economy really is. So let's continue our conversation around the innovation economy, and let's talk a little bit about this thing that I'm calling the impact on GDP. Now, what do I mean by GDP? GDP is this thing that the governments all measure around what we call gross domestic product. So the total output of a country. So GDP gets tracked for the U.S. government and countries around the world, and it's one way that investors look at a country to determine if it's an area that you can invest in. It's got a robust local economy that is generating both jobs and good returns on investment, and is seeing growth, meaning the role of that government and what gets produced is something that other people want and that other people will buy. So what is the innovation impact on GDP? Now, GDP in a lot of countries grows. It varies pretty widely. China has been at a GDP growth that's been north of 7%, 8%. There for a while, it was north of 9%, which is unbelievably, no country can sustain that kind of a GDP growth, annual GDP growth. But, most countries, 2%, 1.5%. But growth is important. It is the signal to the world economy that what your citizens are producing is important and that others buy it, and therefore is a driver for the economy. Now, what's really interesting in this case, though, is that innovation is now credited with more than 50% of GDP growth over the last decade. So we've had this shift of GDP primarily being measured on, how many widgets were manufactured and how many cars were produced and how many, you name it, tractors and, things like that, hard tangibles that were produced. Now, more and more, though, that the GDP growth is driven by the new things, the new innovations, meaning 50% of the GDP growth is coming from items that are relatively new, not another automobile or another tractor or another whatever. So innovation is having a huge driver for this GDP growth. And now it's actually becoming important when you look across all of other countries as to what is it that makes up that GDP, and therefore what could it be from the standpoint of the role. Now, In the past economy, another way to look at this is not just with GDP growth, but to also look at it from the standpoint of stock market. If you look at the stock price today, and you look at the stock price, from a decade ago or 2 decades ago, longer back, stock value was tied to book value, tangible assets, things like buildings and factories and machines in the factory and tools and inventory, things that you could go around and touch, and count. But now more and more shareholders are bidding up those shares in order to contain what we call that innovation value, the non-tangibles, patents, copyrights, the expectation that a company is going to be able to continue to drive and create new innovations. You don't know what their next thing is, but they bake that future into the current share price. Perfect example of that is Apple. And if you remember back, 18 months ago or 2 years ago, there was this expectation that Apple was going to announce a new phone. Now, Apple didn't announce anything. It was purely market expectation. And you started seeing the share price start to do this rise. You heard a lot of buzz in the press about that there's going to be this new great device that's going to come out. It didn't happen, right? Apple didn't announce that they were going to announce anything, nothing. It was all just market expectation because there was always this new thing that Apple was always coming out on a regular basis. What happened when Apple didn't release that product? The share price took a nosedive because there's this baked in inherent expectation that in the innovation economy that you're going to continuously come out with something new. And when you don't, there's this disappointment. Now, this role of it being part of the GDP growth also plays in the share price. And the real challenge is that it's accelerating. There's more and more expectations being put on to companies of that they need to be able to introduce new things and do that on a regular basis. And the pace of those introductions and the pace of what it takes to get people to go, wow, that's new, becomes harder and harder. It requires organizations to be right on top of it from the standpoint of their teams, how they organize, all those kinds of things. And so this driver for this innovation expectation puts a lot of pressure onto leaders within organizations and even leaders within governments. How do you encourage the innovation that becomes now 50% of your GDP growth? So the question that you really have got to face then really is, are you ready? Are you ready to win in this innovation economy? Are you ready, and is your organization ready? So what is it I mean by this innovation economy? It's both an individual. Are you skilled? Are you ready to contribute? It's no longer about what you can, do with your hands, do with your muscles, or do using just your past knowledge. It is about your value gets determined by the ability to generate new ideas that then can be turned into new products, new services, and that drive an innovation premium. So are you ready? Is your organization ready? It requires new management structures. It requires cultures that encourage and support innovation. It's no longer, okay, we've always done it the same way the last 20 years. We're going to continue to do it the same way. You are going to be out of business. And then in countries, it also gets down to taxes. How do you incentivize people with tax breaks, such as R&D tax credits? How does a country invest, putting pools of dollars in there, that risk capital, in order to drive innovations in new and interesting areas? And also policy. What is the policy, legislative policies, to encourage the innovation economy? So when we come back, we're going to continue on in these discussions, talking about the individuals, organizations, and we'll talk a little bit about government policies to encourage growth in the innovation economy. So you're not going to want to go anywhere. We're going to be right back. And again, we do have a special announcement here in the fourth segment, so you're not going to want to go anywhere. So we'll be right back. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the Biz Talk Radio Network.
Biz Talk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations, but before we hop into this segment, I want to acknowledge our sponsor. Sponsors are important. It helps us as we work to create the content for you, help support that effort, work alongside of us. Sponsor for today's show is Zoom. I've been a long-time user of Zoom. If you've been a long-time follower of this show, you know that we use Zoom each and every week to connect with our guests who come in and via Zoom to participate from all over the world. Zoom, it's you got to try it out. It delivers absolutely flawless video, clear audio, a great method of sharing and collaboration, allows teams to work better together no matter where you're at. And how do I know this? Because I've been using Zoom for over a year, both here in the studio for the show, but also in my day job. In fact, at my day job, about a year ago, we started on this process of replacing all of our other video collaboration technologies to use Zoom. And now 100% of our team is on Zoom, and it has just been transformative. And in fact, we did that independent. It's not related to this sponsorship. We chose Zoom just because of the high quality of what it is they do. And it's not just us. Gardner just put them in the Magic Quadrant for web conferencing this year. And the other piece is I did a lot of research before I chose to use Zoom here in the studio for my guests. You know why? Because Zoom is the only video conferencing system out there that doesn't suck. So try it out. Give it a try. You get a free account that allows you to meet up with 50 video participants. Hop on over to killerinnovations.com/Zoom and check it out. So let's pick up our discussion with regards to the innovation economy. And we're going to start off really talking about organizations. Is your organization ready? Are organizations in general ready? So in this case, this is a survey that shows, CEO survey, it's Arthur D. Little. It's a little bit dated, but it's actually still been pretty accurate. That innovation, if interviewing CEOs, and I think there was like 250 CEOs in this survey, that innovation has increased in importance over the last 10 years. 92% of the CEOs say yes. Now, of those same CEOs, the question was, does innovation play an important role in the assessment of your company value? 73% say yes. It's important for the valuation. People at companies, if we're public, it plays a role in our share price. If we're private and we're an M&A target, the value of our innovation plays an important role in assessment of our company value. The interesting statistic here, though, is that only 35% of CEOs are confident in their ability to manage and measure innovation impact. And if you can't manage it, you can't measure it, you don't know whether or not you're doing it correctly. And this is just an absolute shocking statistic. This last statistic is just mind-blowing for me. That you're only going to get 35% of the CEOs that get it. Now, I'm thinking, okay, that's really, really low. But here's even a more shocking statistic. And that is that only 17% of CEOs consider themselves above average when it comes to innovation. Sit back and think about that for a second. Only 17% think of themselves as being highly creative or being above average when it comes to innovation. So that just is shocking. So that tells me that some organizations get it, most don't. And let me tell you, I hear about it all the time. So the next question is your team staff ready? Are you even ready? Now, this is a statistic. If you listened to the show in the past, you've heard me quote this statistic. There was an Adobe survey out there that was questioning people's creative abilities. And in this Adobe survey, only 25% of people believe they are living up to their creative potential. They think there's more, but they just don't know how to do it. They don't think of themselves as creative. So the real result is, which means 75% of the population do not consider themselves able to think creatively. 75% of the population do not consider themselves to think creatively. Think about that from the context of the innovation economy, or some people may refer to it as the creative economy. And the challenge being is what is it you're going to do about this? If 75% of the population do not consider themselves creative, then who are going to be those people who are going to drive and win in the innovation economy? And let me share a point here on with regards to locations and government and all that. Everybody thinks it's Silicon Valley. It's not. There is no clear winner yet in the innovation economy. In the manufacturing economy, there were some pretty early winners. The UK was really big. US was really big. China came on strong. Russia came on strong. We are almost like a restart. We are in the first inning of a 9-inning game, using my baseball analogies, of the innovation economy. We are in the top of the first inning. You can't predict the winner yet, which means any country, anywhere in the world, if they get their act together, can win in this innovation economy. And it is mind-blowing what it's going to take from the standpoint of getting everything aligned, individual skill sets, organizational management styles, organizational cultures, and then the government, getting the governments aligned around the innovation economy. And there's very little alignment that's occurring. There's some shout-out countries that are doing some things incredibly well. I would hold up Singapore as an example where they revamped K through 12 education to actually teach things like critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, etc. But just because Singapore is doing it well doesn't mean it's doing well in other parts of the world. In fact, in an analysis that was done on a very, very large segment of workers, and they categorized them by younger generation professionals and older generation professionals, only 17% of younger generation professionals are classified as problem solvers. Yeah, as opposed to 57% in the older generation. Now, I don't have a hypothesis as to why this is. So it's not like, obvious off the top of my head as to why there is this gap. But innovation is all about problem solving. You see a problem, you see a challenge, you see an opportunity out there. And then the question is, how do you solve it? What's the idea that you come up with and solve it? Now, I'm not saying that this is going to predispose that we're all in trouble because the younger generation isn't ready to take on the mantle. I don't know if all of us started at 17% and then over our experiences we become the 57%. I don't know. The study didn't go into that much detail, but this is just kind of one of those yellow flags. Now, I will argue, though, that in the educational system, we do not teach critical thinking skills. We do not teach problem-solving skills. We don't teach personal creativity. Look, what's the thing that gets wiped out of the educational systems, at least here in the U.S. and in a lot of countries, is what? Music and art. Music and art are really the first things our children experience that they themselves then discover that they are creative, that they are innovative, that they can come up with something new, right? Create a new painting, do a sculpture. My first big award that I won was an art project that I did in 6th grade. I still have it. I'm 56 years old, and I still have that 6th grade art project because someone said I was good at it, and that was one of the early sparks for me. So the question is okay, great. We're sitting here, it's doom and gloom, right? Only, so small number of companies are ready for it. Governments aren't really aligned on it, and the skill sets of the population aren't ready. So what are we going to do about this? That's what we're going to talk about in the next segment. What is it going to take, and how do you get the help you need in order to win in this innovation economy? Look, there's 12 years of content available in the show. There's my book. There's other people's books that are out there. We give away a 2 free-hour audio training just to kind of get you started. You can just go over either philmckinney.com or clearinnovations.com. A pop-up will come up. You can, snatch the free 2-hour audio training. There's lots of things out there. But I'm telling you, by the number of phone calls and the number of requests that I'm getting to come out and do speeches and run workshops, teach organizations, train teams, meet with governments on their policies. We're seeing this acceleration, and this is your heads up. You want to be in this game where you're going to get left out, just as like our fathers did, in case my fathers, when the steel industry went through the downside. So stay right there. We're going to be right back after this commercial break. We've got an exciting announcement for you to share kind of what's going on here. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. In this segment, as I've been telling you through this entire show, we have a big announcement to make. And with that, I want to bring in our special guest for this segment. It is Mark Vericchione. Mark is an old friend of mine. He's been on the show before, and we had him on here when he was one of the founders of a company called STEMLEAD. But Mark and I have known each other for 20-some years, starting way back when I was one of the founders at a company called Telligent, based in Washington, D.C. It's a telecom company that we took it public. So, but Mark and I have known each other for quite some time, and as I've talked about in the last segment of the show, one of the things I'm seeing with this innovation economy is just this absolutely explosive growth in emails to me and phone calls to me and people wanting coaching, mentoring, consulting, come in and help them with their company. And I've got a day job obligation, right? I'm the CEO at a company. I'm fully committed to my CEO role because in that role, I run the R&D and innovation lab for a global industry. So from that standpoint, I'm driving an innovation economy with an entire industry, and I'm full in on that. At the same time, I try to accommodate as many of these requests as I get. So Mark and I were talking over the last handful of months on how to deal with this, because again, the number of requests that I'm getting is just overwhelming now. It's accelerating at such a pace, and I've seen that the economy is coming. It's impacting more and more organizations, and more organizations, such as we just talked about, are recognizing that they're not ready for it, both on an individual basis, but also on a company basis. So what we're announcing here today is the formation of a new company called the Innovators Network. Mark is actually starting this company called the Innovators Network. I have made the decision to exclusively hand over and license all of my material, including all my book that's already out, the second book that I'm just finished up the first draft on, book number 2 on the 7 laws of innovation. All of the killer questions, all of the podcasts, the radio shows, my workshops, all of my one-day seminars I do with companies, and Mark is going to run that in this new company called the Innovators Network. I am investing not only my all of my intellectual properties, but I'm also putting money into this new entity with Mark to get it started. And Mark, with his team, then are going to take this and make this much broadly available. Scale it so that all the companies who are asking for help and asking for assistance, and individuals who are looking for skill set improvements and how do they get ready from a career perspective in this new economy, can have this access, can get to this information, can get the support they need. And it's the best way that I can think of from the standpoint of trying to extend the reach and help as many people as possible given that I've got a day job and I'm driving my own impact on the innovation economy with the role that I have running as the CEO of this R&D and innovation lab for the global industry. So with that, Mark, thanks for coming on the show. So it's so what's the weather like in Virginia today? Is it warmer?
Hey, a little warmer than it was in the past. But hey, Phil, thanks a lot for putting me on the show and letting the people know what we're doing with the Innovators Network. I think as we've talked for many years, discussed and strategized, how to best get this in the marketplace. And we both see a gap in the marketplace today and a need for some of the things that we've talked about. Pushing in education and helping to drive that through workshops and innovation community, coaching, mentoring, online academy and so forth. And then, around the kind of instituting in a corporation, some of that life cycle engine of innovation, from culture to, methods and processes, and helping companies, create their story, entities, companies, governments, working with them and creating that story and ideating. And we've talked many years about ideation and how to best do it. And there's many processes out there, methods around doing it, but I think we've got a good one here that's been proven. And we've got some real people that have experience driving innovation in the marketplace. So, glad to get out here and announce this. And, folks want to go to Innovators, the innovators.network. They can see more about what we're doing. The big thing is this is a community and an effort to really drive, innovation and help people do it and help be successful in the innovation economy.
Yeah, I think this is important. There's nothing going to change here on the radio show. Nothing's changing on the podcast. I'm not going anywhere. My focus is going to be continuing on the content delivery. I'm working on the second book now. Third book, title and rough outline is already kind of rattling around. We've got the Innovation Bootcamp, which we've been running a handful of times every year. So nothing changes along those lines, but it's really the ability to take that content and make it more broadly available. Also, we're not announcing it here today, but we have other innovators, people who are proven innovators in other industries and in other segments who will be joining the network here soon. So stay tuned. We'll announce those as they come up. So again, as Mark said, you want to hop over to the innovators.network. It's a landing page right now, but it'll give you a listing of the services that Mark and his team will be making available, including both individuals, helping individuals, with their coaching and mentoring and their ability to get their career in a position to really take advantage of this opportunity in the innovation economy, but also helping organizations. And one area that we're going to be announcing relatively soon is what we call the Innovators Community, where I'll be involved in kind of an online virtual mastermind kind of mentoring opportunity, again, and something that I can scale easily and have impact. But again, the Innovators Network will be hosting that and running that. So you want to hop over to the Innovators Network, check that out. And Mark's contact information is over there, so you can feel free to reach out to him. If you have any questions, you can obviously reach out to me. And as we go forward, we'll be putting out more information as we get going here. So with that, we're going to wrap up the show here real quick. I want to thank you for joining. And again, hop on over to the Innovators Network and check out what Mark's doing there and see if that might be of assistance to you. With that, we're going to wrap up today's show. We'll be here next Sunday live. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
The opinions you hear on Biz Talk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, Biz Talk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on Biz Talk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about Biz Talk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com. Biz Talk Radio.
Autism. 1 out of every 68 children in America are impacted across every race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic group. If you aren't directly affected, someone you know is. Today's world doesn't support those on the autism spectrum. It needs hacking for us to truly welcome those who think and create differently than ourselves. We're Hacking Autism, a nonprofit charity with a mission to hack therapy, technologies, and career opportunities that improve the personal and professional lives of people on the autism spectrum. We believe that everyone can play a role in supporting those on the autism spectrum so that they can show their unique talents and abilities in this fast-paced world. You aren't powerless in this fight. Use your gifts and talents to make a positive impact. Join us in making a difference. Go to hackingautism.org to learn more.
Carpenters have their hammers and saws, chefs have their outfitted kitchens, and musicians have their instruments. A craftsman's ability to do their job is dependent on having the right tools. So where does an innovator, someone who takes an idea and makes it real, find the right tools to do their job? Outfit your innovator's garage by visiting innovation.tools. Innovation.tools is an online store created by innovators for innovators. It's where you will find tested and proven tools to help you create that next great product or service. These tools include books, audio training, video training, brainstorming how-tos, and much, much more. And for a limited time, listeners of Killer Innovations will get 25% off on your first order by using the discount code RADIO at checkout. And 100% of our profits from your purchases will be donated to charity. So go to innovation.tools and create that next great innovation.
Rwanda is a shining example of how the global community can come together and rebuild a country after a devastating genocide. But there is still more that needs to be done. In the rural villages, students are crowded into schools with no electricity, no running water, no internet access, and limited sanitation. Will these kids be ready to continue the rebuilding of Rwanda, or will they be dependent upon others? Through education and employment, boys and girls have an equally promising future that can transform their struggling communities. For $20 a month, a child can be educated and a community strengthened. By supporting Pioneer Education Africa, a 501c3 charity, you partner with others to provide education that will prepare a generation to take on the task of self-reliance. 100% of the proceeds received go directly to the education of the children. Visit pioneereducationafrica.com to find out more.